And we're recording. Hello, Shonen Ouji here. Today I have Dragon Ball Dad, aka Mark, aka YouTube's biggest One Piece fan. And how you doing, Mark?
Really, really glad to be here. Really good topic of conversation discussing everything about the Straw Hats on Wano. Been great to reread the chapters because it seemed so long ago. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk it.
Yeah, so for anyone who is wondering what the heck we're going to talk about, there's like a sentiment in the One Piece community, not necessarily everyone, but there's a sentiment that maybe not all the Straw Hats aren't getting the attention they deserve. So in this video, we're going to talk about each Straw Hat briefly and just see if we can't figure out whether they're being used properly in the current arc or if they somehow got a bad deal. So, Mark, I'll start you off with an easy one, Luffy.
Luffy, I loved his original arrival on Wano when he met Tama, the dumpling girl, and we had the talk of Ace. And I thought it was a very mature moment for Luffy actually, when she was all oh, Ace isn't coming back, and she was going, nobody understands how I feel with Ace not being here. And Luffy kind of took it. He stayed quiet and dealt with his grief really well in kind of mature way, more like mature than I expected him to react. I expected him to have something to say, he was my brother, something like that. But he really acted his age, which was kind of a surprise to me. I think all the Straw Hats have shown a real maturity in Wano. I think they've grown in previous arcs, and this is them as one of the strongest crews, one of the biggest crews, and showing exactly what they're capable of. And I think with Luffy here, we've seen him do his traditional. He's arrived there. He's saw that the residents are hungry. He's promised to provide food and fix things there. And then it's been more a case of growing in terms of strength after his fight with Kaido, when I think that was the most crushing defeat that he's ever had. Like, it was just completely one-sided. Ends up in prison, and that's where we see the training arc begin. A beautiful rivalry with Kid. I love the interactions with Kid while he was locked up, and now it's all about working on his haki in order to improve it so it can damage somebody from the inside rather than being like an eternal blow. And I'm interested to see what that's done if he's closed that gap.
Yeah, I don't really think there's any question about Luffy. I think if you have even glanced at One Piece, you can tell he's clearly getting plenty of plenty of attention, especially in Wano. One thing I will point out that you talked about with Tama is, especially when the anime episodes aired, was he's like still the same Luffy that we know, but he's got this like presence to him where at times when he's with kids, he almost seems like a dad, like especially with Tama. And you can see it when he's compared to Ace, and then that kind of transfers to when they're in the prison, not so much a dad, but he's very much like a leader.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's got that Roger about him now. I think we're seeing the future Pirate King in action. We've seen him grow so much, and I wouldn't say that this growth has necessarily come in Wano, and I wouldn't say that for any of the Straw Hats. I think the growth that we've seen in the previous arcs is kind of showing us what they're going to be like when he's the Pirate King. That's the way I would put it.
All right, so we'll move on to another big character who you might even argue gets more attention because if you watch the anime, they make sure to give him beautiful animation scenes. Zoro. What are your thoughts on Zoro and Wano?
Oh wow! Well, I don't watch the anime, so I'm going to have a completely different take. I think Zoro's journey is all been about finding his new blade, getting him to Enma, because we've had him really be lost most of the story, so he's segregated from the other Straw Hats because of that. And I think that he's had. I think we're going to find out something about his background. It seems like there's something connecting Zoro to Wano. Of course, he's another that's improved in terms of strength in training with Enma. But I've been really fascinated with the interactions he's had in gaining that sword because it's been gifted to him by Oden's daughter. And I don't know, there seems to be more going on about the backstory there. I don't know what your thoughts are on Zoro.
I really like Zoro. I mentioned the anime. They like make sure to give him like beautiful fights. But sticking to the manga, he's certainly gotten a lot of attention with all of his like solo adventures, especially when he was trying to get back Ruma's sword, the Shusui, and then now there was plenty of attention on him training with the new sword, and there's this whole thing with like, oh, it's like a thing. This sword is specially made, so it works with hockey. Blah 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 blah. Um, there's like the whole thing with like him potentially like being connected to Wano.
Yeah,
So there's plenty that was given to Zoro. My only thing, and it's not like an attention thing or like a bad deal thing, literally, my thing is in terms of like him having a sword, he's been screwed so many times. Because first he had it stolen, then when he's trying to get it back, and like literally everyone in Wano is like, "Hey, you're a cool guy, but we can't just go out like giving swords." And there's like one point right before the raid where they have like 50 swords, and he's like, "Can I just
yeah.
have one?" Like,
Well,
I'm not like the 2 sword user. I'm the 3 sword user. Like, can I
yeah,
just
give me one.
like it was him, Kawamatsu, and Hiyori, and they had like 3 swords, and he's like, "Can I just have one? I don't even care which one it is."
I loved it when Luffy had one. He had one of the legendary swords early on,
Yeah.
and Zoro was just like, can I just have a look at that?" And he was
Yeah,
like,
like
no,
even
no, I'm
Luffy
going to
is
use
getting a sword, and Zora's like, "Look, I get that I have 2, but I use 3 swords. Like that's my thing. Like, can I just
Luffy.
have one more?"
Luffy didn't even use it, but I think there's got to be some kind of reveal because Enma before only Oden could ever use it. No other samurai's been able to use it since, and now Zoro can. So there's gonna be some reveal into his backstory. I mean, we had all of Sanji's backstory gave out in Whole Cake. I think there's only Zoro that's got that kind of story missing to me. I know we've had how he got trained in the swords, but I think there's still something kind of about his parents or something like that missing. We need more.
So you mentioned Sanji and his background, and I don't know how many people, but there is a sentiment among the community with some fans that Sanji got a bad deal in the sense that he didn't really change like since Whole Cake. So I want to ask you personally, because I mentioned this to you before, but I want to ask you again. Would you say Sanji's gotten a bad deal in the sense that like he's kind of just like another Straw Hat, or do you think because he's obviously gotten like some fighting time and he got the transformation, but do you think Oda is like giving him like due diligence?
I think he's been used well actually because what they did, Whole Cake obviously filled in all the blanks. We got all the family story, but what we got here is a big display of Sanji as a whole. If you remember, he was cooking at the stall, and we got that whole the gang come over and throw the food down, and that was a traditional Sanji kind of moment when he hates food being wasted and he rises to the defense there. But here you mentioned that he got the raid suit, which was a signature of his family. It was from the Vince Smoke family, and the whole story with Sanji on Whole Cake was his past, how he had this trouble with his family that he didn't want anything to do with their scientific weapons, and he even says it was his dream to be invisible. So it is ironic that he is being given this power because of his family, and I think that it showed a great development and maturity in Sanji that he was willing to put his family, not forgive them, but kind of put everything that had happened in the past and use this power to help the people of Wano because of the situation. He wasn't happy about doing it. He was saying he would rather throw this away, but because he can help and it is a case of a damsel in distress and food being wasted, that he will use a tool that he doesn't want to use to come to the rescue, because that the Vince Smoke family history is something that really sits heavy on him, and it's not something that he would just use for the sake of the power, even though everybody else wanted him just to use it because they thought it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that argument that like, oh, he hasn't changed, blah 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 blah, and it depends on like how you look at Whole Cake because like you and me, we look at Whole Cake like he had this struggle with his family and his identity, like related to his family, and he struggled with it at the end of Whole Cake, and then even on the way to Wano, he's like, I'm not going to put on the suit, and then when uh, it's the worst case scenario and he needs the suit, he uses it. So he clearly is willing to, even if he hasn't come over his family problems, he's managed to put those aside for the sake of his crew. Whereas in Whole Cake, he was like clearly like very weighed down by it. So in that sense, there was the transformation. But again, I guess like you could argue that he's like the same character, but you'd kind of have to ignore the whole "I just got over my family" thing.
Yeah, I think after all this time, it's going to be very hard to give someone like Sanji such a big developmental arc in the previous arc. Like Whole Cake was not that long ago, and then add straight afterwards more layers because it would just seem kind of too much. It'd be like the Sanji story if they were going to give him another big developmental arc. So I think it's right to leave that kind of settle and wait until maybe a couple of arcs down the line before we get some more character growth from Sanji.
Now, before I move on to the next Straw Hat, I want to talk about the Zoro Sanji like rivalry. Whereas in previous arcs, it was like very clear that they hated each other. Everyone, at least I was expecting Zoro to give Sanji some crap when he came back because Zoro's the kind of guy who does not mess around. If you mess with the crew, he has a big problem with it. He made it very clear with Usopp, and he made it very clear on Zoe when he said something to the effect of, "Look, we don't have time to screw around. If he wants to go mess with Big Mom, let him go mess with Big Mom." And then the chapter came when we finally see them together, and like they were like generally bickering like they usually do. But Zoro, to my knowledge, has not said anything about Sanji leaving. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know what you mean. They had that moment when they both stepped up. It was at the execution scene, wasn't it? And they both step up together in the defense, and there was no kind of you shouldn't have left. Like we saw Zoro give Usopp grief after he'd left, saying just leave him unless he apologizes. He can't come back, and he hasn't really give that to Sanji. And I don't know if it's kind of he understood the situation, but didn't want to give him support at the time. He couldn't say, "Oh, well, I understand why he's leaving," because he wanted to represent the crew. So I don't know if he's or if it's going to be there's something later down the line coming. I don't know. I think it's kind of a more respect thing. I don't think he's going to say anything about it. I think it's just going to be let's carry on our inner crew rivalry. I think he's happy to have him back, but he could never say that directly. So it's kind of just going to be put under the carpet. I guess it's like if a family member lets you down and I don't know, you don't want to bring it up to kind of spoil things for everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. I mean, I think everyone has their own interpretation of that rivalry. When I first read that chapter where they were like planning and they got the samurai armor and they were just like teasing each other and they never brought up the whole Big Mom thing, I was like, okay, maybe he should have said something. But ultimately what I ended up thinking was he's probably just like thinking to himself, okay, Luffy, my captain, he went there, he took care of it. What's done is done. We got bigger things to take care of, so I'm not going to waste time putting up with it. But I like your idea that like he secretly like Sanji, like respects him, thinks he's his buddy, but he would never say that.
Yeah, I think like you say, what could happen now if he brought it up? I mean, it would just cause tension in the crew, or it would just end up in a silly fight between the two that there's no time for at the minute.
Yeah, and Zoro's like, yeah, we got bigger things to do.
And Sanji's a lot stronger than Zoro anyway, so.
If anybody decides to comment, that would start such a storm. So I want to move on to another character who has been the target of a lot of criticism. This is something that has been present throughout all of post-time skip, but is continuing to be present in Wano. Would you say that Robin is underutilized? Because obviously her big arc was Enies Lobby, and like that was her thing, was like coming to terms with who she was and like making a decision that she was like actually gonna live her life. So when you have such like big arc like that, it's kind of hard to develop the character. So again, same question: underutilized or due diligence?
Oh, I think Robin and Nami have both been underutilized. To be honest, I mean, Robin has been undercover and she was useful in the terms that she got some information. But other than that, and a scene at the bathhouse, which was fair play to Oda for putting that in for us. But yeah, she hasn't really done much. I mean, I'm trying to think how they could use her. I mean, Wano was full of history. She could be out trying to find something historical that could help the gang. Maybe it could have been her that was trying to find a legendary sword to help Zoro. Maybe they could have found out. It could have been her who went on the sword mission because she knows that about history. She could have thought, I'll look for one of Oden's swords to help him. Like they could have run her in that way to do something that that had a bigger impact, because I don't think they needed her and Nami both kind of undercover looking for information, because they both basically did the same thing, apart from Nami used a cloud that she stole off Big Mom. The two have done nothing, which is a shame, really, because I really love women in One Piece. I think they're normally very strong. They have really big moments, but this arc, they haven't really had the chance. But I guess they've got to give shine to so many characters, not just the Straw Hats. I mean, we've got Law's crew there, then we've got everybody that had anything to do with Oden. So there's a lot of people to try and give shine to, and maybe they're just in time to give everybody in the crew time.
Yeah, I mean, I will say Robin has done a fair amount in the sense that she got a lot of valuable information for the crew. Like when they went to Orochi's palace and they came back like after like the jig was up and they're like, oh, we didn't do anything. And she was speaking to Conjuro and she was like, oh, all I got was like these secret messages and all these plans and these building architecture documents. And Conjuro was like, oh, you're actually really useful. But I would say that she's probably underutilized in the fights because, again, we know she's like really capable in fights with her devil fruit, but all she really uses it for lately is to just like defend or like kind of like flank. So other than like her like ability to just like get information and kind of like coordinate the team, I don't really think Robin, in terms of like literal utility, has done much. The one thing I like about Robin in post time skip and especially in Wano is one, she is hilarious, especially with like all the epic faces. And two, she has a lot of like mom moments. Like she's sort of like the mom of the Straw Hats. There's the scene, it might be anime only, but or there's a bunch of scenes where she's hanging out with Momonosuke and there's like kind of like a guardian type relationship. And then there's the panel I really like when they're hanging out and she's got Otoko and she's kind of like just holding her and she's sleeping and she's just like looking at her. And she's got like this mother-like aura to her.
I think both the girls are kind of so needed for the crew. Can you imagine if it was just the guys? It would just be chaos. And I really think like for a shonen like manga, it's very, very hard to kind of give good demonstrations of people being undercover and stealing information. Like that kind of covert stuff is really hard to kind of demonstrate. So I think we know how useful they are because what we're told, rather than it being a case of pages. I think in terms of relationship though, they're so needed. I mean, obviously Nami in case of navigation skills, but I think they're like the glue that holds us together. If it was just Luffy would just be off somewhere, Zoro would just be lost, and Sanji would just be eyeing up the women. Like there'd be no like coordination.
Yeah, my thing. Robin is obviously the mom, like I just said, and then I've never thought of a better way to put it, but Nami is kind of like the pimp in the sense that like they would totally just waste all their money if nobody actually held on to the money. But since Nami holds on to the money whenever they go to an island, like she's like, okay, what do you want? And she like gives you an allowance.
Yeah.
So in that sense, she's like the pimp. I can't think of like a better term. But we'll move on to Nami. I know we talked a lot about Nami, but a little more in depth. What would you say? Would you say that like there's really nothing she can do, or she could do more and she's just being underutilized?
I think she's going to have a big moment because we've just had the situation where all the boats have been destroyed. So I think it's going to be Nami who helps get them there. I think she's going to do something in terms of navigation to get them to the battle in time. So I think that's where she's going to shine.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we had the scene where they're about to raid and then it was a big chunk of the ships. So also there was the thing with the Mary, or no, not the Mary, the Sunny. They attacked the Sunny. So there's all kinds of possibilities for how they're actually just not even like fight, like how they're just going to get to the island.
Yeah, and like I think if the boat has been destroyed, it's going to be a case of Frankie making something and then Nami navigating them there. But I think during this arc, she's had the power up by having the cloud from Big Mom. I think that's like she's had her moment just attacking Orochi. Like that's been her main moment. I don't think anything else really comes to mind. I think this has been probably her poorest arc in terms of usefulness and moments to shine.
Yeah, I mean it's cool to see her like going on the little missions with Shinobu. Um, Other than that, it's kind of like just Robin, where it's just cool to like see her like being buddy buddy with everybody. Like there's the one panel I really like where she's got Carrot and then oh, I can't remember her name, but the dog lady from Zoe, and they're just like face to face, and they're just being like all cute, like buddy buddy, like gal pals. So it's more stuff like that with Nami and Robin. Um,
Yeah,
but
like slice of life.
yeah, slice of life. That's a perfect way to put it. We'll move on. Usopp. Um, I love that he's like a snake oil, toad oil type salesman. It's totally him that he would just like trick people in that sense. But other than that, other than his like get up, what do you think? Underutilized or due diligence?
Oh, I think another underutilized, actually. I mean,
Okay.
Usopp, I think he provides kind of great comic relief in this arc, and he's always somebody who is good for that. But I love it when Usopp ends up with his back against the wall and he has to perform some kind of heroic deed that he doesn't really think he can do, but then does superbly. And I think I'm waiting for that Usopp. I mean, he's a master of what he's doing right now, being kind of undercover, telling
Mhm.
lies, and he's in his element. And we're seeing like all of the gang fulfill their roles that they naturally do very well. We're seeing Frankie build chips. We're seeing Chopper heal people. We've seen so it's kind of they're in their elements, and I'm waiting for that moment where they get pushed beyond what's natural for them as a character and pushed to their next levels. That's what I'm waiting for Usopp. I don't think he's underutilized, overutilized. I think he's doing just what he should be.
Yeah, the tough part of the question is like we're really only like not even halfway through Wano, so it's like we know there's going to be a big battle, so it's like a determination of like, okay, who do we think is going to like have like their big moments in the battle? Um, I'm sure Usopp will have some sort of fight because even in Dressrosa, he had the moment where he had two moments. He had the one where his face lit up from the hot sauce, and that was absolutely hilarious. But then he had the other one where Sugar was on the platform and he shot up his face, and that was really helpful for the team too. Even though I don't think he had a really big fight in Dressrosa, but those were cool moments. Hopefully, he gets like an actual like fight in Wano, but we'll see. I don't really know. I mean, who do you think he would fight? Because I can't really think of anyone he would like be able to like actually stand up against.
It'll be Orochi. It will be Orochi. They're both the tricksters,
That's a good
both the
point.
liars.
I
I
think you
can't.
told me.
Yeah, that's where I see him getting a chance to shine as well because it would be kind of who is more devious. But
That would be funny.
one is like heroic devious, one is like an evil devious, and I can't wait to see Orochi get it. I mean, the
Yeah,
most heartbreaking thing in this arc for me so far has been the whole the smile fruit leaving the villagers
yeah.
unable to cry after like suffering so much pain. And I thought it was interesting seeing Zoro in that situation actually when he was meeting these people and he was wondering why they were
Yeah.
smiling at the funeral. I think it's that needs rectifying. So I'm ready for some justice to be dished out by Lord Usopp.
So I'll move on to the next character, Chopper. And before I ask you the question, I'll just say it's interesting with Chopper because he's been getting some pretty decent development in the sense that um, we saw in Fishman Island, he like made his transformation more monster-like, so he'd clearly come to terms with like who he was in that sense. But um, as he's been in the post time skip, he is becoming more and more of like a leader figure. We saw that in Whole Cake with him and Carrot, where Carrot like kind of looked up to him and he was like her big brother. And then in Wano, the biggest thing with that was him leading the team with Big Mom, which we saw him like actually freaking out, but him just like not losing it and managing to get her to the prison with nothing going wrong until they got to the prison. I think Chopper has been definitely receiving due diligence in the sense that he just led like a pretty important task, and like there's a fair deal of characters that look up to him.
Yeah,
But what do you think?
I think Chopper's had a real chance to shine. Actually, I loved seeing him with this, like you say, more responsibility. I mean, he was left in charge of Big Mom, and if you think what Big Mom could do if that went wrong, and he really handled it well. He had those moments of panic where it was like, oh, what if she remembers who she is? But without him, Luffy wouldn't have been freed, which was obviously really, really important. As well as that, it gained so many soldiers because we were missing a lot of soldiers. We that upped the numbers by the thousands, and not only that, he's really shined as a doctor as well because we had that the virus hit when it was spreading from person to person. Luffy got it. Luffy had a great moment there actually when he caught that virus and he was still like, "What? You're supposed to be samurais," and he was ill but still saying this. And Chopper treated them all. So I think Chopper's really stepped up to be like the doctor he could have always been because now he is not only curing these kind of complicated viruses really, really easily. Like he didn't struggle to come up with an answer to that problem, but he's also able to do so much more than just be the doctor, and not in terms of physical fighting so much here, in terms of leading and thinking and using those brains that he's got to solve other problems. So I think he's really came out as somebody you can really rely on. Mm-hmm. He's not just like the cute little bear or the one who's lost it completely in a battle. He's really you can rely on him. You can leave him with Big Mom. You can leave him with big jobs on his own. So I think it's been a really good arc for Chopper. It's been real solid, and he's done what he's great at, and more on top of that.
So probably one of the more difficult characters to argue for. What do you think about Brook?
Oh, Brook. He served his purpose. Brook is a character like that I've always never really been that attached to. Like he's my least favorite Straw Hat. I loved him once we learned about like Binky's tale and where the song came from, his relationship with the whale. But for me, he's always been just kind of there. Like I'm not really a big Brook fan. I mean, he had his moment being a ghost again, scaring people and helping in kind of combat sense. But I don't know. He is for me. He is the most comic relief. I mean, his purpose on the crew is musical entertainment, as far as I'm aware. I don't know what to say about Brook. I like downselling him.
I think it's really just Wano right now because I would like to think he's going to get a big moment in the battle coming up. But as far as like post time skip Brook, what if nothing else? What he demonstrates, not unique to him, but I like to see it in him, is he is always sure to demonstrate, whether you're an enemy or an ally, that he is 100% behind Luffy and he 100% believes in his captain. We saw that in Fishman, where he was fighting the invisible character, and they were looking up and they're like, "Oh, your captain's going to lose," and Brook was like, "I believe in him. He's going to be the king of the pirates." And the thing about Brook is he's not afraid to get into a fight, even if he's not like completely sure he's going to win. With Dressrosa, there was the scene where they were like stuck as the paintings, and he like managed to get them out of that situation. But probably my favorite scene with him so far has been when he was getting the poneglyph at Whole Cake, and of all people, Big Mom comes up, and he doesn't even hesitate. Like, he comes down, he takes out his sword cane, and he fights her until she beats the ever-living crap out of him. But before she does that, he makes clear to her she's an emperor, but he's not going to back down because he believes in his captain and he believes in his crewmate, Sanji. So he's not going to do anything to let them down. So unfortunately, he hasn't really done much other than like his job as like a ghost in Wano. But I have faith that Oda will give him at least one good moment coming up.
The Whole Cake Brook, I absolutely love that moment that you're talking about. I mean, it's not that I think he's a bad character. It's just that within the Straw Hats, I see each of them fulfilling a very specific role. And I don't know if that is like a closed-minded way of looking at it. It's just I struggle to see what Brook's main function in the group is. And he has had those great moments like at Whole Cake. And I will say that I did love that moment, and more moments like that. I will fall for him more. It's just hard compared to the other Straw Hats who, as characters, I hold them up in terms of every manga I've ever read. Whereas Brook, he wouldn't be in like my top 10 characters of all time. Whereas the other Straw Hats would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard. He came late, so even like you said, he had the whole Bink Sake and the whale. That was his big thing.
Yeah,
But like that's something like we're waiting on. It's long term. So as in terms of like the narrative right now, it doesn't really have an effect. Like I said, he's always like the first one to stand out for his captain. But in terms of like what he's done in Wano so far, it's a little bleak.
yeah. I don't want to hate on Brook. And for the Bark was my least favorite arc, which doesn't help him either. I feel bad now. I
Yeah.
feel like a hater. But yeah, let's move on.
It's just hard because it's not that you hate him, it's just you have like the least to say about him.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
again, he's just a latecomer. Like he wasn't at Ennie's lobby, which was like the big thing for all of them, so he doesn't have an attachment to that. I think again, it's just a detriment of him being a latecomer is we haven't spent as much time with him.
Yeah, the bond isn't there yet. We'll get there.
All right. So let's see. Luffy, Zoro, Nami, Usopp,
Just got
Sanji,
Frankie left.
Robin, Chopper, but we got everybody.
Did we do Frankie? Did we talk
We
about
did not
Frankie?
do Frankie. Ah, oh no.
Well,
Uh,
I think Frankie's been excellent, actually. I mean, he was in the perfect place, working as a shipmate's assistant, helping build the fleet that they need. I think he's had some real motivational moments where people have said, "You don't need to make this many boats," and he's like, "I'm going to make enough for the extra numbers." So that's where people got the theory that we were going to have like 5,000 instead of 3,000 or whatever, because he was prepared to have that many made. Don't know what he's going to feel when now everything's been destroyed. Now all that hard work has been destroyed. But I think he's done a really good job. He had an interesting relationship with his boss at the shipyard, where they were arguing when he'd sold the plans for Kato's mansion, I think it was. He had the plans for, and then now he has to go and get them. But I think he's done a real solid job. I think he's been in his element really, and I think he was involved in one of the fights as well, where we with Sanji. I think he backed up Sanji in that fight. Shun there, he always shines in battle actually. So I love Frankie. So yeah, I think they've done a good job with Frankie.
yeah. I'm curious to see who he's going to fight because clearly I completely forgot about him. So in the back of my mind, I can't think of what he's done so far, other than like you said, he like sumo wrestled and like pile drived this one guy when they were
Yeah,
defending the soba shop. But other than that, he couldn't get his hands on the blueprints for Onigashima. So he was serving that job. He can help in fights. Unfortunately, that was like his one little like skirmish. Um, it's curious to see like who he'll fight because obviously we've seen most of the Kaido's pirates, but we haven't seen all of them yet for the most part. Um, Usually in his fights, it's like who's going to be the tougher man, like especially in Dressrosa. That was his thing is like who's going to be like the cooler man. So I don't. What do you think? Like is he going to get like another big fight? Do you think maybe he'll just like serve more of like a tactical role?
well, we've just seen like Kado call his crew, and we haven't met all of his main players yet. Do you remember like the big giant people we saw coming in on that panel? So I'm
The
wondering,
numbers.
yeah. So I'm wondering who maybe one of those guys, because I'm looking at it like this. I'm going to give Luffy's going to fight Kado. I'm going to say Zoro's going to fight Big Mom, and then I'm going to say Orochi to Usopp, and then we need someone for Sanji and Frankie, and I don't know if it's going to be two of these guys.
Zoro fighting Big Mom. That is an interesting take. I have not heard yet. I could totally see it. It would be interesting to watch. I don't know how likely that is.
But everybody's argued to me saying, "Oh, but who's going to fight Kado?" And then I thought, well, Big Mom's there. She's an ally with Kado. She's going to need to fight one of the main Straw Hats. It's going to have to be Sanji, Zoro, or Luffy. And surely Luffy is going to want to fight Kado after losing to him. It's going to be a kind of revenge thing. Show the effect of his training. Oh, my telly's
Yeah,
on standby. There we go.
there's just so many possibilities for this raid, and I have no idea what's going to happen. I don't know who's going to fight who. I don't know. I'm dying to know when Jinbei makes a play, because
I
if
hope
he
he's
just
not
like
dead.
comes in at the end of Wano, I'm gonna be like, ugh,
I can imagine Big Mom revealing she died. He died. That would be like
oh,
a
that'd
heartbreaking
be
thing to do.
terrible.
Because you think about it, how did she beat him back? Really, like if he'd stopped her, he should have got there before her.
Oh my god.
So if they did like
He,
a reveal like that, like,
oh my
oh, can you
god.
imagine Luffy's reaction if they did that? Like, I hope they
Luffy
don't.
would be like, oh crap.
But hopefully I'm wrong. But yeah, there's so much greatness. I would want more sumo wrestling. I've loved all the sumo stuff, especially in the prison and then beforehand. But yeah,
Oh, that was awesome.
yeah, there's lots to come. Lots to come.
All right. Well, I think the general consensus is some of the characters, specifically Nami and Robin, have been a little underutilized. Although we have faith, for the most part, Oda's doing a pretty good job. But we still got to wait for this upcoming battle. So that's really all I have to say. Do you have anything to close us out?
No, just thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Bye,
Of
everybody.
course. It's always a pleasure, guys. Comment, let us know what you think about the Straw Hats and Wano. If you like content like this, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for listening, and both of us hope to hear from you soon.